Today I go into the book of Daniel, and I'm excited to see Daniel because with this evidentiary methodology that I've been using, this grid work methodology, it reveals a lot of truth. And each time you go through it, sometimes you'll see things, even, you plan your presentation and you'll see things that'll throw you off because, wow, that's cool, or the use of that words or that phraseology opens up even more. It's kind of like mining. All of a sudden you see a little gold, you dig down a little bit, and you find another trough of gold. So pretty darn cool. So I'm hoping to see that with Daniel here. Before I do, I wanted to go over my chart again because I had to change my chart because some information that came to me. If you remember this chart that I did where it talked about the kings, and I had Daniel living like 120 years because I had the fall of the 70 years coincide with the fall of the reign of Belshazzar. And so that's wrong because the reign of Belshazzar was still within the 70 years. Now, Cyrus and Darius came into play, but it was a good decade or two before the edicts that they put in place could actually start coming about. So you have the Jews are still in their captivity when Babylon falls. But when also the reign of these kings are going on. So you'll see I changed the timeline. You see Ezekiel at the bottom. There's Jeremiah. Now you see Daniel. I put him about 10 or 15 at the time of, right before he went in the time of Jehoiakim. And then there he is through the fall of Jerusalem. And then I have him through evil Merodach, Nebuchadnezzar, and into Belshazzar for about 13 years, 10 to 11 years, somewhere there about. Belshazzar force gets killed, and here comes Cyrus and Darius. And so it's interesting there, so I had to change that. So you see the kings along the top, nothing changed there. The captivity of Jehoiachin, nothing changed there. But I had to change this end of the graph. I wanted to also go into the life of Daniel and show it on a bit of a graph. And this is the life of Daniel and, of course, the book of Daniel. Look at this real quick. You'll see the captivity. You'll have where he was born, and I'm speculating he was about maybe 10, 15, I don't know, he could have been older or younger. But you'll see this zone is about 80 years, and so, okay, that makes a little more sense. You'll see Nebuchadnezzar's reign was right about the time that he was taken with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into, and then you had evil Merodach for only about 9 months, and then you had Belshazzar for about 10 years or so. The circles there are the chapters. You got chapter 1 happens right near the beginning. Chapter 2 happened pretty close to one another at the beginning of his time in Babylon. You've got chapters 3 and 4 intermittent. Could have been anywhere in here. That's Nebuchadnezzar talking. You get 5 and 6 are way at the end. This is the Daniel and the lion's den in the time of Darius. You also have him talking with Belshazzar. Remember the hands on the wall is chapter 5 is the handwriting on the wall. Chapter 6 is Daniel and the lion's den. 7 through 11 are theological. They're prophetic. They're not historical anymore. He's giving prophecies. So he gave a prophecy. You'll see 7 or 8 or somewhere in the middle right after evil Merodach. Then you had 9 through 12 are at the time of Darius and Cyrus. So look at that and see how everything falls about. So for the first 8 chapters, we deal with history, and the last 4 chapters, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, we deal with, so that's actually 6 and 6. So you deal with the prophecies. So half of it is history, half of it is prophecy. So it's interesting to see that. I had wanted to do 2 chapters at a time, but I felt I'm going to be rushing some important information. So chapter 1 is a startup, and chapter 2 deals with the metal man, this whole dream that Nebuchadnezzar has, and we'll go into that. So beginning in chapter 1, it says, at the beginning the reign of Jehoiakim. Remember, we're going all the way back to the reign of Jehoiakim. Nebuchadnezzar came in, and the Lord had Jehoiakim, he gave Jehoiakim into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. And he took back to Shinar, to the house of his God, the vessels that were in the temple. And he spoke to Apesnaz, the master of the eunuchs, and he brought in certain of the king's seed and of the princes. Now, I don't think Daniel was above the king's seed, but I think he was one of the princes, you know, the noblemen that reigned under the king. I think he was tied to them. He and also Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. I'm trying to say that instead of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's the one we memorized. But Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were the other three men. So they're taken in as children. Now, children at that time can be anywhere from like 0 to, 12 or so, right before what the Jews would call bar mitzvah. But, okay, so that's where I get my idea of where these men were. So they took them children with no blemish, well-favored, skillful in wisdom and cunning and knowledge and understanding science, and who were able to stand in the king's palace. This took a certain type of child to have that acumen, to have that intelligence, to have that foresight. And they would train them in the Chaldean language and appoint them daily provisions of meat and food. This is reminiscent of what we'll see later in the book of Esther, when all those women were taken. And for a year, they were provided for. They were giving oils, and they were giving all kinds of beauty treatments. They were also giving times where they would have knowledge and that they would learn and all these kind of things. So we see this here, is that he has a time also, and they nourished them for 3 years. So they gave them wine, they gave them meat, they took care of them, they gave, of course, them clothing and whatnot, kept them healthy. But they trained them for 3 years that they might be able to serve under the king. So they learned the language, learned the cultures, learned what they were supposed to do to serve the king. And among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And so we learn about them, but Daniel and these men purposed in their hearts not to eat of the king's meat. Now, they didn't know what this meat was. I mean, it might not be kosher, for example, and that would defile them before their God. There could be in the preparation that it was not prepared very well. That could also defile them. There's any number of ways. They weren't eating the meat because they were vegetarians. Let's not go there. They weren't vegans and vegetarians. Ooh, this is the Daniel diet. I see a lot of people wanting to do the Daniel diet. If you want to honor God and not defile him, that'll probably be your diet. If you looked at foods and said, too many carbohydrates are defiling. All they do is make me heavy. All they do is make me lethargic. All they do is make me frustrated because of all of that refined sugar that we eat and all of those massive amounts of carbohydrates that just put on weight. But here, he's not doing this because he's anti-meat. He's doing this because how the meat was taken and processed and the types of meat. Remember, the Jews could only eat certain types of meat. Well, if you get the smorgasbord of meat, they might give you pig. They might give you, some sort of ostrich or some sort of eagle or something you're not supposed to eat. So we're having that. And God honored him with favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. He cared about these guys. And he was the one who was supposed to feed them and take care of them. His concern was that if I don't give you the meat, if I don't feed you like I'm supposed to, you're going to look worse in the king's eyes, and he's going to fall back on me. So Daniel says, okay, well, give us a test. So for 10 days, feed us broth, feed us lentils, feed us vegetable soup, all this kind of stuff, and see what happens. Keep the meat away. So he probably gave the meat to someone else and gave them this lentils, this broth, this vegetable soup to eat. And when you looked after them after 10 days, they looked healthier than the men that were doing the diet of the king. And again, I don't know what kind of meats it was, but there are meats that we're not supposed to eat. So he did this for 10 days. And so he took away their meat, and Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah went on to learn and to grow. And it says, he took away the portion of their meat and wine that they should drink, and he gave them pulse, which again is like a lentil, vegetables, broths, all kinds of those things. And it says that these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill and learning and wisdom, and Daniel had learning in all visions and dreams. Now, this is a special gift that God gave Daniel, the idea to have visions and dreams, and that's going to come in handy in chapter 2. But this happens right at the beginning, right at the time of Jehoiakim, and then Jehoiachin becomes king after that. And at the end of the days, that the king said that he would bring them in. So this was after 3 years. So that's why in my timeline I pushed chapter 1 is right about near the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar, right after Jehoiakim. And then you go a couple of years. And the king communed with them and among them and found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore, stood they before the king. None could stand for these 4 guys, because they honored God, and God honored them with understanding. God gave them wisdom. God gave them, we'll see later, prophetic utterances. We'll see that these guys go into the fiery furnace and come out. And it says, in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king required of them, he found them 10 times better. You study your Bible, it'll give you understanding 10 times better. You know, you want to be smart, do what I'm doing. If you want to be smart, get the grid work. If you want to be smart, get the evidentiary method going in your life. It's free. Just get yourself a King James Bible and start reading it. And so Daniel was with them. In all matters of wisdom and understanding, he found them better than all the magicians and astrologers. You know, those people that are guessing and looking at the stars and looking down into whatever intestines that they're looking into. And he continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. So now that's his timeline right there. I didn't look to see. Maybe I'll find out when we think he died. But I know he was there for the 2nd year of Darius, because that's where we get to chapters 11 and 12, which kind of go together. So this is the beginning of this wonderful story, and I don't want to take a foot race through it because I want to cover it very well. But this is looking great. Here's this man of understanding and wisdom. You want to be a man or a woman of understanding and wisdom? It's right here. Take this, read it, look at it evidentiary, not conclusionary. You don't learn anything from conclusionary Christianity. You learn by reading the evidence. Thank you.